Hello again! I'm back. Today we'll be discussing Emerald Sister and her character/redemption arc. Redemption arcs are tricky things and likely deserve an episode all their own, as do fan reactions to redemption arcs. But that's for another day. For now, I'd just like to thank my wonderful sponsors for making this episode possible. So, we technically meet Emerald at the end of Volume 1, but we really only get acquainted with her in the start of Volume 2. I covered a fair bit of that in my clothing video about how in the bookshop scene Emerald is trying to mimic Cinder's femme fatale mastermind vibe, but also how she drops it for an overeager and affectionate adherent the moment Cinder's in the room. These scenes serve as a neat contrast. It shows Emerald has a ruthless side, but also that it is not natural to her and heavily rooted in her deeply uneven relationship with Cinder. Her interactions with Roman and Mercury also give us an introduction to how Emerald operates among peers or in relative isolation, while her time as the RWBY outreach officer serves to inform us a lot about how she views the world. Or in other words, it was setting up pins to knock down at the end of Volume 3. Because it's clear that despite her frustration at the general happiness and optimism of Team RWBY, that Emerald herself wants something similar with Cinder. That is to say, she's not nearly as different from Team RWBY in that regard as she likes to think. But early Emerald's lack of self-awareness didn't exist in one domain, but many. For instance, Emerald didn't need to pickpocket the shopkeep or RWBY, but the first she did for fun, which leads into the second when she used it as an icebreaker with Team RWBY. However, their friendly familiarity with her at this point makes it entirely needless. So what was the point, besides getting one over Team RWBY like she did when she stole from Roman? And more to the point, why does she come out of those engagements, or even more serious ones like Amber and Tuxen, so confident or even amused, only to be so impacted by the end of Volume 3? One could simply shrug and say the scale of it was too much for her, but that doesn't really go into why Emerald thought her behaviour was acceptable before that, nor does it cover why she conducted herself the specific way that she does. Or more, did. Why is it so important? Well, I'd say because it gives us a look into Emerald's sense of identity, because you see, while I don't buy the everyone is the hero of their own story mentality, I do think that most people adopt morals or ideals that reflect their personality or what they deem desirable for a personality that they wish to have. This is true even for more overtly evil figures like Roman or Cinder. Their ideals are survival and self-protection, with people who risk themselves for others being fools or liars, which is a worldview that makes a lot of sense to adopt given their life experience. Meanwhile, Emerald was a thief, a street rat. She got by on cunning and gumption while the world left her to rot. She's a canny trickster like Odysseus from Greek mythology. This is why she bothers to pickpocket RWBY, or the shopkeep, or Roman. In her eyes, she's the underdog biting back against those ignorant and arrogant people that put themselves above her. And up until the fall of Beacon, it was easy to view her actions as acceptable. Her devotion to Cinder filled in any loose cracks, and she could justify her actions in one way or another. Tuxen was going to betray Cinder, so it was fine she did what she did. Amber had all the power in the world, but the way Cinder talks about it, it's hers, so it's fine. But the fall of Beacon? That's when they stopped just robbing, bullying, or taking out people who Emerald could rationalize. Now, everyone's being hurt. Street kids like herself before Cinder are going to be hurt and killed. It's directionless carnage, and her companions are reveling in it, while all Emerald can see is the sadness. This is actually a big part of what I like about her redemption arc. She played real impactful roles in the schemes, which gives her redemption arc actual weight. But whatever the case, Volume 3 planted a seed for potential redemption. After this, the only time we see her close to enjoying her work was when they take the Branwen gang down a peg, i.e. acceptable targets. But to rewind a bit, following Volume 3 we get to see just how unpleasant the environment of Salem's palace is for both Emerald and Mercury, how they're little more than Cinder's pets or tools and not even seated at the table. The likes of Watts and Tyrion able to basically do as they want with them provided it doesn't tick Cinder off. Meanwhile, Salem is alien and haunting in general. We followed up with Volume 5 where Emerald seems to be back in top form since leaving the castle, but that quickly gets shown to be a facade once they actually have to fight someone that isn't bandits. She's justifying herself, aggressively highlighting her motivation about Cinder at the slightest question, almost like a part of herself is unsure. Then Cinder seemingly dies and she has a full-on breakdown. QV6 and the paper-thin veneer of civility is off. Salem is terrifying, there is no kindness or mercy in her. Tyrion will torture and murder them the moment he's given an excuse. The only one who shows any consideration is Hazel, but it's gruff and distant, so it's unclear how far it even goes. Emerald's left questioning her position, her choices, and whether or not they were doing the right thing. One could simply interpret that as being worried about doing the right thing for themselves, but I think it dovetails much more naturally back into my earlier Odysseus, trickster, underdog argument. Her loyalty to Cinder is further challenged both by Mercury and amusingly by Tyrion, the life coach. We cap off V6 seeing their disgust and horror at Salem's growing grim army, with Hazel being further tied to the both of them, but especially Emerald. We rejoin Emerald during Volume 8, where she starts off extra clingy to Cinder, as if trying to convince herself that Cinder cares, that this was all worth it, that she isn't deluded. only to have that challenged by Mercury, implicitly mocked by Neo, and belligerently dismissed by Cinder's anger and disregard until she's finally had enough and starts making moves, at least to escape, because that seems to be all she can do at this moment. But she runs across Hazel and Oscar, themselves engaging in the very act that she likely was, and this is giving her a path out. However, temporarily before she becomes something of a prisoner, but with her skills she could slip out. She's unsure of what to do with herself though, and her argument that it's hopeless in many ways can be seen as her looking for validation from the others that it's okay to just run and hide. But when she's given the perfect chance to escape, namely everyone being distracted by Penny's situation, but sees everyone trying to help her, Emerald makes a choice. The person she once helped kill, she will now help save, and then, seeing they weren't willing to give up on Penny, tries to get them to not give up on beating Salem and resolves to help them moving forward. Now in Vacuo, as Grimm swarm in, she prepares to fight to protect others rather than Cinder or even herself. And that's how you get a redemption arc. We see the villain, we see their ideals and their emotional motivation. We see them engage in active villainy, and then we actually see them encounter the consequences of their actions and are left struggling and grappling with the reality of their situation and what they've done. We see them try and stay the course through the sunk cost fallacy, seeking some sort of justification for their actions and how far they've gone. Something to make it all worthwhile, before ultimately coming to the conclusion that none of it was and trying to leave, and then, with a little bit of help, a little bit of guidance and circumstances to their side, they're able to make a new path themselves. Suffice to say, I'll be very interested to see where Emerald goes from here. Oh, and if you'd like to help out with episodes or commission 3D models, please swing by my Patreon or Ko-fi for scripts, early uploads, models, and more. For now though, thanks for stopping by.